Hi, welcome back to Innovia Life Conversations. This is Lucas Catton, founder and CEO of Innovia Behavioral Health. And as you know from earlier ones, what the purpose of this is to highlight our practitioners, our counselors, coaches, therapists, and support specialists who are really the ones who add the value to what we do here. And today I'm extremely thankful to have Jean Rodrigues with us. And Jean, thank you so much for your time, not only for this conversation, but for what you do for people on our platform and in your private services. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Luke. It's an honor to be here.
Wonderful. Well, if you could please go, I'd love to know a little bit of your background and history. I know, if anybody's read your profile, you have a lot of training and you can do a lot of different things. So I'd love to know more about how you got to this point and really what your specialties are.
Okay. Well, sure. I feel like my journey really began when I was 16 years old. I was riddled with anxiety, had 3 ulcers, and was completely consumed with what other people thought of me and a lot of stress. And yes, a lot of this speaks to adolescence, but for me, it was a lot deeper. And I feel like I didn't know how to manage my life and I didn't know what to do. And it was so interesting because at that time, I had incredible teachers and mentors that came into my life that supported me during that challenging time. And the one mentor that came in was a professional coach and helped me through brain profiling techniques and really learning how my unique brain works so that I can manage my anxiety better, what a right brain learner looks like versus a left brain, and all of that neuroscience. And then I had my yoga master that also came into my life, and she really helped me understand the space of the body-mind connection and how to actually work with my body to support myself. And through these different modalities, I really started learning how to support myself. And from that age, my whole, purpose was really about how can I support others that are going through these extremely challenging times. And that's what really took me onto the path of self-development and really going into supporting people moving forward. And from there, after school, I did my business degree. And then I was like, right, I need to get into what I actually love. And that's the human psychology. And I did my postgrad, my honors in coaching and leadership for 2 years. And I did an internship at a school. And that was, again, such an incredible experience because I got to work with these curious teenagers that really just wanted to learn and was so engaged, yet had so many personal challenges, school challenges. And then I also started working a lot in corporate, one-on-one, and I opened up my own coaching practice. And connected to that, I did my 3-year Satchinanda Yoga diploma, which really looks at supporting individuals, not just on a physical level, but emotionally, spiritually, and mentally. And my whole kind of practice at the moment is really about providing individuals with support from mentally, emotionally, and physical space to create that change.
Wow, that's amazing. What have, through all of your training thus far, like where have you seen the most change start to occur with other people that you work with? And that's sort of a 2-part question. The other thing is to talk a little bit more about the groups that you offer with Innovia as well.
Okay. I think for me, what has been such an incredible observation and I've done my honors in psychology as well, but to really make the mental and our mind physical. And I think it's such an incredible observation to be a part of, where you are with a client that actually all of their mental clutter and mental challenges becomes an embodiment, and they can experience that, where they actually start to see, oh my gosh, actually my anger is not just in my head, but it's manifesting in my body in this way. And this is how I can actually start to work with these complex emotions in a different way. And I think for me, specifically with the bunch of coaching that I have done, is the groups that I wanted to put forward was the mind body healing connection sessions. And that really speaks to a lot of neuroscience, but also to the importance of creating change, not just on a mental level, because you can have a goal or something that you want to achieve, but how to create that change within your body, understanding your emotions. And all of our emotions store themselves in our body. So it's really about being able to start to learn how to access that in our body through the conversations and narratives we have in our mind.
Wow, that's I think that there's a lot of times where people don't understand that connection, like you were saying. That there's so many instances where people don't maybe understand like what's happening inside their physical body of this pain or this. You mentioned ulcers that you had when you were younger, connected to your anxiety, and so many different things that are adverse effects of their thinking. And when you can make that connection and then unravel some of that, how both their physical and mental health are inseparable, and that you can make change with one with the other, and that they both positively affect each other, just like they can negatively affect each other in sort of a diseased way. So that's really, really amazing.
Absolutely. And I think what sometimes I was actually working with the clients, and I use this analogy, and Freud often speaks about the iceberg theory and how this relates to the conscious and the unconscious. But I like to also think about how we can connect this with our emotions. And if we think about the tip of the iceberg that is above the ocean, it's very much our primary emotions of anger, happiness. And those at the beginning seem quite surface level. And we think, okay, that person's having a bad day. They shouted at me and I just want to kind of step back. I don't want to be around that person. But the base and of the iceberg that's beneath the ocean, and what those emotions really represent are very complex emotions like shame and guilt and pain, invite us to come in. So when we get that anger and that frustration from another, we often want to run the other way. But in those moments, it's often the perfect moment for connection, and to actually sit in the space with the other and actually say, okay, well, what's going on? Let's break this down. And I think it's so easier. It's easier said than done when we look at it. But when we can learn these tools of what that actually looks like on a mental level, how it feels in our body, it's such a game changer, because we can start seeing things very differently.
Wow. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That definitely does. That's so true. I look at I look at people, like you're saying, that they might be having some type of anger or some other type of thing, and people automatically assume something about them, like you're saying, like, oh, stay away or whatever. But there is so much of that I think that all of us deal with, and that's part of why Innovia exists. For example, is that for what might be stressful for one person or might be causing them difficulty in their life could look completely different in another. Not only how they're responding to similar situations, but the uniqueness of their past and their present, and what's going on with them, and how they're doing that. And it's so easy, and we've been taught, I think, through a lot of unfortunately through our educational systems prior to this, of labeling things in an unhealthy way, and then reacting to those based on assumptions, and especially labeling something as bad or negative or whatever, when it may be being able to look at it in a different way, of more of a healing and understanding perspective, as opposed to that's bad, stay away, or that person is bad, or something like that, when it may not be the case at all.
Absolutely. And you make such a valid point. And specifically in this group, this mind body healing connection session, is that I really want to be able to provide the participants with tools and techniques that they can walk away with. So, for example, when we look at all of these emotions, they are communicating with us. So even though in our minds we're like, oh my gosh, I've got this anxiety, I've got this depression, it's back again. It's in its own way, it is our teacher and an opportunity for us to connect deeper within ourselves. And specifically, for example, with a lot of individuals that have dyslexia, some people get very sore stomachs, but this is such an incredible way to actually say, okay, my stomach is sore. There's a level of anxiety here. Something is not okay. And you start to listen to your body, and it stops becoming just a stomach ache. It's actually, all right, this is something I need to listen to, and how can I now do something about it? And then you learn how to navigate that in that way.
Wow. I that made me that made me reflect. Like, we've always had, I've always looked at some of those ailments as being hereditary, for example, and not realizing that in myself, like as you were talking, I'm going, oh, I know exactly what you're talking about, because I've experienced times where that has been the case, and then afterwards those symptoms happen to go away of whatever it may be. That's really amazing, that being able to communicate more with our bodies and listen is I think a skill that we all need for sure.
And you know what, we are essentially our own teachers as well. So it's like being able to have the skills and to know them. So at the end of the day, there's specific postures and breathing techniques when we feel anxious, when we feel more depressed, when we feel angry, when we feel overstimulated. And it's about getting to know yourself. And I think that's what's quite exciting, is I think we have a lot of labeling and a lot of criticism towards ourselves. But I think if anything, these groups serve as a space as, let me get to know myself again. Let me start the conversation, rather than feeling like there's something wrong with me. Because like you were saying, we've grown up in a society where we always have to be okay. But it's often in the not okayness that we learn the most. And I think that's, at the end of the day, my job is not to take anyone's pain away, but rather to sit in the fire with that individual, and they learn how to work with their pain. And I think that's the biggest gift.
That's fantastic. Yeah. You mentioned skills part too, and that's also like the other group that you have is does they play off one another, and one then becomes more of a learning aspect, or how does that work?
So there definitely will be overlaps in the sessions, just because it's my style and how I work as a coach. But the skills sessions are specifically focused on providing individuals with specific tools around conflict management, working with my narrative, working with stress from a scientific perspective, what are my executive functions, how do I work with setting goals. So it's a lot more practical in the sense of it's not so much body, although there is an aspect of that, but it's a lot more getting to know the strategies of how to actually work with the mind through conflict, how that kind of shows up in your body in some ways. But it's just skills, life skills, that almost we wish we learned at school that we never did. And now it's the opportunity to kind of learn, because nobody was ever taught how to have a fight, how to work with that, what that brings up in us, what happens when we feel completely stressed, what happens to our brain, what are executive functions, why can't I concentrate, why can't I focus? And it's all of these questions that we are going to be exploring. And I think for me, what is so important in these groups is to also consider where the participants are at, and people are welcome to bring their own kind of themes or challenges. Jean, I really want to explore this theme in a much deeper level, because it's about learning and getting to know yourself, as I said.
That's great. That brings up the next question for me too, is the group atmosphere. If you will, share a little bit about what's unique about working with groups versus one-on-one sessions, and some of the things that you see happen in groups that you run, and especially live versus, recorded video or that kind of thing. But talk more about what you experience in groups as a whole.
Okay. So there's something for me that I've observed. There's something that's quite special that happens in groups, and it's very much about the mirroring that takes place. That the people that actually need to show up together, they really come together not knowing, but they are supposed to be in the same group. And often there's some very similar challenges or themes that individuals that come up and that are going on in their lives that they need to speak to. And the group setting is wonderful because it challenges our own insecurities and our own wounds in many ways, because one person may say something that triggers another, but that is something that needs to be addressed. And it also creates a space for the individual to also have a voice and to start tuning into their voice, whereas maybe they would prefer to just have one-on-one sessions and they're more comfortable in that space, and that's perfectly fine. But the group creates a dynamic which invites a lot of sometimes challenges for the individual, but the wounds definitely, I think, show up more in a group setting than an individual setting. And it's not about being all, oh gosh, I don't want to be wounded, but it's almost like, sure, that person said something that triggered me, but you're in the perfect space to explore that, rather than being in a business meeting and then realizing that that's actually something you need to work with. But it's also a very sacred space, because you go through a lot of challenging conversations that you can't have with your partners or your friends. So it's a very sacred space that's created among participants as well. And to be honest with you, it is a different dynamic from in-person groups versus online groups. But regardless of the platform, there's that synergy happens anyway. But that is what the groups are about anyway. So even if it is online, it's about being able to tune into yourself, into your body, into your mind. So you have that almost in-person experience.
That's fantastic. Yeah. And you brought up a great point too, that I think that I've noticed myself, and I've had some conversations with like some other counselors about this too, is that, when you have things that you're struggling with in life, whatever it is, or, whether you're at work or, like you said, in relationships, we have a tendency to then go to these people closest to us to either express those grievances or seek help or seek comfort, or some people are looking for, somebody to solve their problems for them, whatever. If we keep going to that's not what those relationships are really designed for. And it can actually at some point put unnecessary and undue stress on some of those relationships, when really having an outlet, having a platform, having a group or individuals that you can go to who are specialized, who don't have some other agenda in mind. Like exactly. If my kids ask me a question, I might give them an answer based on my own input that may not be always the best thing for them, but it's because what I want for them. Whereas somebody can come to a group like this, let's say, and no, we don't have groups for kids. I'm just using that as an example. But that that somebody could come to a group like this and speak to someone like you and be present with other people who don't have some other agenda in mind, because their personal lives don't, they go back to them separately. You don't have, like, you're not wanting some change for them or to give them some information for your own personal gain in any way.
And thank you, Luke, for sharing that, because that's so true. It's almost like this is a space where individuals learn how to create their own support system. Because often we expect our partners and friends to be our mother, brother, sister, best friend, confidant. And it's so much pressure and expectation that consciously and unconsciously that we have in the other person to fulfill all of these sides. Whereas actually your partner cannot be your therapist or your counselor or your coach. And then unconsciously we get frustrated with them because they're not telling us what we want to hear, and it creates that very gray space. So yeah. the difference and the invitation is almost like that these groups create a space to be supported and held in a way that you can have these difficult conversations and challenging conversations and actually get support that is going to give them tools and techniques where these participants then can take those tools and techniques and then implement them in their relationships and partnerships and see, okay, this works, this doesn't, but it's more from a space of getting to learn for yourself rather than trying to change the other or trying to get them to see you differently. So it is definitely a space for creating support systems, which is amazing.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. And the other part of that too that you brought up regarding like work and work relationships and how much, if you can talk a little bit about in a corporate setting, for example, you have a group of employees and they have all their unique challenges, not only with whatever they bring in to work personally, but also what they're experiencing on the job and how they interact with each other. You know, how using groups like this, how can that have an impact at work?
Well, for example, there are skills that we never learned at school that we are almost expected to know the minute we get into some sort of working environment. How to navigate conflict, how to have challenging conversations, how to express your needs and what you want and what you don't want. Yet when we are almost bombarded with these intense emotions of stress, anxiety, we move into a space of reaction. And the work environment can receive us as being reactive. You're this type of person, this is what's happening, and you almost move into a very disempowered space. So if individuals can almost learn the skills of how to have honest conversations, what does that actually look like? Having those specific tools in their toolbox, then that creates a very different type of relationship because you're going into the work environment learning how to respond rather than react, and within that you become more empowered rather than disempowered. So knowing yourself, what your triggers are, also understanding how to work in the workspace with challenging conversations or having meetings accordingly and navigating that is so important. And these are the skills that will be unpacked specifically in the skill sessions.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. It definitely does. As you were talking, I'm picturing umpteen million workplace environments that I've seen or experienced or whatever, and going, wow, yeah, this could have, we could have totally saved this employee if our team had these skills or whatever the case is. Because employee turnover, workplace stress, things like that are really the world in general. It's kind of at an all-time high in terms of like stress lately, the last couple of years, especially, whether they're working from home and have unique challenges there, or they're in an office environment, or they have a job site or whatever it is. There's just been a heightened level of stress planet-wide. And I think that finding ways to address and alleviate and navigate is so important now more than ever.
Absolutely. And it's almost like we've been on this hamster wheel, and it's learning how to still kind of have that hamster wheel and do what you have to do, but you have the tools to pause, to reflect, to actually take time to figure out if I'm okay or if I'm not okay and how to navigate that. And I think that's one of the biggest thing that I saw with so many of my clients, specifically when we were asked to pause as a world during the COVID times. It was almost like I feel so many of my clients said, I feel like I have been running for the past 5 years of my life. And now that there's almost been a pause, I'm actually just not sure what I'm doing and who I am and what's happening. And that's okay, because I think we often find ourselves in those dark nights of the soul and those challenging times. But it's in those times when we need, okay, what does my support system look like? How do I work with this? Because work challenges aren't going to end, and the pressures of family life aren't going to end, but it's learning how to find that stillness within yourself to work with everything in the chaos.
That's perfectly stated. That makes so much sense.
I'm
Wow.
glad. So I'm not sure if it's making sense.
No, it definitely does. I guess really, is there anything else that, as we've been talking, that you thought was relevant that you wanted to share, or anything else about what you do or your groups, or anything like that you think would be good for other people to know as they're listening to this conversation, possibly?
Sure. I think for me, the most important thing is for people to kind of have an experience of getting to know me. So I think this interview is a great starting point. And I would really encourage individuals to start a conversation, whether it is through the social media platforms that I have, through Innovia Behavioral Health, just so that I can create that support space through Innovia, so that I can answer these questions that people may have moving forward.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, Jean, I really can't thank you enough. Again, not only just for this conversation, but for being a part of what we're doing, and for doing what you do as a whole. So thank you again.
Oh, Luke, thank you. I honestly feel so grateful, and this platform is incredible, and I cannot wait for it to just grow, and just for people to get the support that they need on a variety of different levels. So let's grow, let's connect, and let's see what happens.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.